This is Chip Maxwell, and you're listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. Today, we explore the seismic shift in office real estate as companies move away from traditional large buildings towards smaller regional offices and adaptive reuse of spaces. We also look into misconceptions around Warren Buffett's treasury investments and take a close look at evolving housing market trends in major cities. Stay tuned for insights on what these changes mean for banks, urban development, and investors. You sent the team a couple items I want to make sure we cover. One is it's another CNBC headline: more office space is being removed than added for the first time in at least 25 years. That sounds seismic.
Well, it's astonishing, really, but the reality is people moved out to the suburbs, people moved and went remote. Now people are bringing people back to the office, but they're not necessarily bringing them back to the big old fogey office buildings, right? And so we're seeing these pop-up workstations where people are working in collaborative workstations. People are, because of what employees kind of demanded from this, a lot of companies are now building small regional offices or just taking over smaller old banks. And we had a ton of banks closing the brick and mortar doors. They're not closing the bank, but they're shutting down branches, right? They're just not profitable to run these branches. And those have been converted into smaller office space. So the big offices are no longer really being built. I mean, right here in Omaha, Merkle Insurance, who now has got their offices on the 2 floors right above our building, our heads right now here in our building. They had the 2 towers downtown that are now literally being converted into housing. And so it makes a lot of sense. It's for urban development and economic activity to have condos and apartments built in downtown is a fantastic idea. Now, the counter trend of that, we have a large building, a large insurance carrier here building the tallest building in Omaha as we speak. And that got a lot of our tax incentive financing here tied to a certain mass transit system that we won't mention because I don't want to get my blood boiling here. But basically, right, why are they building that when they, from what all reports we hear, they have less than 14% of their people that were going to the office to begin with? So really, really curious on that. But anyway, this is a trend that we probably see continuing, and it doesn't bode well for banks that are holding loans on all these buildings, Chip. That's the real problem here. We've talked many times over the last 15 months, buildings selling for pennies on the dollar, right? The hotel in downtown San Francisco, 5-star hotel I stayed in just 5 years ago. They just mailed the keys back to the bank, and that was a Hilton property. We've seen building after building in major towns, Baltimore, St. Louis, we've shown them right here on this show, that are selling for 15, 20 cents on the dollar. That is continuing, and that does not bode well for banks.
Fire sale prices and just walk away from it.
So who's losing here? The bank that made that loan, right? Because they're having to forgive a ton of money, and that is a problem. We have about $600 billion in unrealized losses on the balance sheets of the top 200 banks in the U.S. as we sit here today.
David, you sent me this headline, and I was intrigued as much by your comment as the headline. So the headline from CNBC is, investors are piling into big, short treasury bets alongside Warren Buffett. And your comment was, journalism at its worst. Were you knocking CNBC or what?
Yeah, I am, absolutely.
What's wrong here? Well, first of all, what's going on, and what do you think is wrong with the analysis?
Because they're telling you that they're shorting U.S. Treasuries.
Yeah.
That's not the case. Says. They're buying U.S. Treasuries, short duration.
Okay.
Warren Buffett, one of his great quotes, never been against America. He's the biggest holder of U.S. Treasuries. He's not shorting the bond market. He's buying U.S. Treasuries.
Okay,
so
define what it means then to short a treasury
You would be
bond.
Selling them. You would be betting on them crashing in value. Now, what they are doing is they're going shorter in duration, the longer duration, right? So duration is how long to maturity. So you can buy 1-year bonds, 5-year bonds, 10-year bonds, 20 or 30-year, right? So 30 years is a long-term bond. Now, when yields go up, as they have in the last 30 days, the longer the duration, the more that bond will go down in value in the short term, only if you sell, right? So if you hold to maturity, you can't lose any money.
Is that inverted bond curve you've talked
yields
about
go up,
before?
Bond prices go down, and vice versa.
Because the long term should be more valuable, but sometimes the short term is.
If interest rates go down in the future, they will be worth.
Yeah.
But what Warren Buffett is doing is they're taking their free cash flow and they're buying U.S. Treasuries. the headline is trying to sensationalize like he's shorting the government, and that's nonsense. Warren Buffett has been quoted many times, never bet against the U.S., right? So anyway, I just thought it was disingenuous the way they framed that headline.
Boy, that is shocking for CNBC to get that turned around. All right, so let's get into the housing market items. You sent these around to the team, David. The first one is a chart about, we've been looking at Florida a lot lately. This is the Dallas housing market, and you're saying this housing market is about to get cheaper.
Well, look at the listings. Over the last 4 months, the amount of listings has accelerated exponentially. And there are neighborhoods where there are 15% of the homes vacant, according to Melanie Wright, who's a real estate reporter that I follow. She's put out a lot of great content over the last 15 years following real estate through the Great Depression. And we have these, and you got to remember, all the listings that have popped up, we showed the recent listings in Florida being more than the 10 largest states in New England, right? Combined.
Yeah.
We're seeing this pop up in Phoenix. We're seeing this now in the Dallas market. And so people, if they're wanting to sell their house, are going to have to come off their price significantly, which I find it ironic. I literally got my postcard in the mail yesterday, Chip. My valuation on my home went up 9% this year.
I got that love note too. Mine 9%, went up significantly.
So that means they're going to increase my taxes 9% when the value of my home didn't go up. It actually went down, and is going to go down over the next 12 months. So I would highly encourage every one of you that has the time to contest your property valuation statement you just got, Douglas or Sarpy County, Lancaster, doesn't matter. Go in there and fight, because it's not realistic. How do we give these people an unconstitutional way to just keep raising your taxes arbitrarily by 9 or 10% when your value is actually going the other way? Anyway, that gets a whole nother rant.
Just anecdotally in conversations with people, my niece just bought a house for the first time, and one of my children is a homeowner. Others are kind of looking. They're young people trying to find a place that's
it's difficult for young people to afford houses,
it is,
for sure.
And that's my question. Is Omaha, Omaha, you've mentioned this before, Omaha tends to avoid the extremes, high or low.
Yeah, we're very well positioned to weather recession, yes.
Okay, so it seems like the housing market here locally is still pretty strong.
Yeah, so I would
tell you. For the
seller,
I mean.
Yeah, so the mean price of a house here, you're probably safe. Even if we go through a deep recession, you might go down 3 to 5%. And if you're buying your house for shelter and to stay in it 5 to 7 years or longer, don't worry about it. Now, if you're trying to buy it to flip it, which people get excited, or, we're going to buy this and fix it up and sell it next month, I would be really cautious in that regard. I own my home here. I own rental properties here, right? I own them in other states. We talk about that. And I have sold properties in the last year or so, seeing what's coming. And that's just because I have the ability to do it in a unique way, and I typically rarely will have to ever pay tax on any of those sales, et cetera. So just caution. But if you're a young person trying to buy a house for the first time, don't overspend, right? And buy the house. My advice to people is always, when they're buying their first home, buy it envisioning that you're going to live there 5 to 7 years and then turn it into your first rental property. In other words, you're going to save up your down payment for your next house. Don't buy it as your forever home, or the home you think you're going to permanently raise your family in. Buy it as an investment. Get your mindset right, because it's a great long-term investment as long as you're willing to be long-term. Problem is, job movers today, people job around, they switch jobs much more frequently than our generation did, and they may not be able to stay in that house. In that regard, you may be better off renting. If you know you're going to go in a career field and you're going to move to a city like Dallas and maybe try to get promoted out of there in 3 years or less, I would not purchase a home. I'd highly recommend you just rent and invest your extra capital.
David, you mentioned some places in the country, Florida and Texas and other places, the housing inventory is growing exponentially, was your term. Well, maybe that's reflected in this headline. This is the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. Realtors panic as buyers pull out of deals at near record levels. Market is crashing before our eyes.
Yeah, so we're having typically 15 to 20% of closings that are supposed to happen each month are no longer happening here throughout the U.S. So people are getting buyer's remorse before they close, right? They're getting a little nervous because, maybe if we back away, even if they lose a couple $1,000 deposit, they may be able to buy that house $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 cheaper. Here in Omaha, like we talked about, if you're buying down in the, say, $200,000 to $400,000 range, you're not going to have massive changes. But everything above $500,000 here, we're seeing you have to come off the price 8, 10, 15%. We just had one. I walk my dog every morning through my neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood where the houses are typically 500 to $1 million or so. And I just saw one that went down 15% to get the deal closed from what they listed at about 4 months ago. The other thing we're seeing is listings that go stale is really skyrocketing. That's over 60 days, according to realtors. They call that a stale listing. If it doesn't sell in the first 60 days, it gets stale, and so you have to do a price drop to get attention back on your property or something, and so that's a concern. Again, if you have to sell, you may want to get out in front of that and just drop your price now to get a deal done. If you don't have to sell, you may want to pull it from the market.
With the hope that, a year from now?
Yeah, if you can sit and keep the house for 2.5 years or longer, you might want to hold on to it because the prices will be fine, but we're going to go through a little bit of typically the housing, when we roll through these cycles, it's about an 18-month cycle to get through the price, the valley, and get back to where we started from. So we'll measure that in future shows and future years, but if we started January of this year and we were to look at January next year and the year after that, you're probably not going to see a lot of change in the actual price of what the house is worth.
Thank you for listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. If you want to learn how to generate lifetime income, reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, visit retiresmartpodcast.com and make sure to subscribe to keep up with new episodes every week.